Welcome to episode 45 of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts, and today I talked with Keelan Sanders, who is an engineer and producer operating out of Melbourne. In this episode, we talked about trying to achieve a specific attitude when recording, giving the artist confidence by having confidence in your own abilities and decision-making, as well as the beauty of experimentation. For all that and heaps more, stay tuned. If you could do us a favor and share this podcast with your friends, with people in the music industry, people that might be interested in it. That way we can spread the word about all of the awesome guests that we have on here. If you're not already, make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. That way you can stay up to date with any new episode that I release. Follow us on the socials. I'm going to be organizing some merch, which is exciting. So you can stay up to date by staying in touch on the socials. If you want to know any more about my guest Keelan or myself, you can check out the show notes. There's links to all of our stuff in there, as well as a link to the email address podcast.whatsthatsound@gmail.com. You can get in touch with me if you have any suggestions or if you want any questions answered or if you have a specific guest that you want interviewed. You can email me. Apart from that, let's just get into the episode. Let's not waste any more time. This is episode 45 of What's That Sound podcast with my guest, Keelan Sanders.
You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts.
Welcome, everyone, to What's That Sound podcast. I'm Stu Watts. Today, I'm here with Keelan Sanders. Keelan, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thanks, Stu. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Let's kick it off. Let's learn a little bit about you. What do you do in the music industry?
Producer, mix engineer, sometimes mastering, but mainly focused on production and mixing.
Production and mixing. Love to hear it. And tell us about where you grew up, what music you were into, all that sort of fun stuff.
I grew up in England, in Northampton, which is like an hour north of London, which is why my accent's a bit weird.
Okay.
I got into music. I guess my mum used to sing in a band before I was born, but I knew that she was musical and she would still sing around the house and that sort of thing. So probably through that, I got my first interests.
Yep.
Started playing acoustic guitar when I was a kid.
Was it a serious band that your mum was in or just like a fun?
They played some shows. They did like a demo tape. I asked her to send me the tape and I tried to remaster it for her and bring it up to date,
Yeah.
So that was a cool thing.
What sort of music was flying around your house?
Well, she loved like Fleetwood Mac, Van Morrison, bit of ABBA, a bit of Annie Lennox, like Eurythmics, that sort of thing. And then, later on, she was getting into like Jack Johnson and James Blunt, and that's where I lost interest.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like 2000s pop,
Yeah. So more easy listening, folky sort of stuff, and a little bit of rock here and there. But do you think that like influenced your kind of musical interests at all?
Yeah, it'd be hard not to be influenced, I think, by Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, totally.
I feel like I don't know an audio engineer that wouldn't enjoy that sort of thing. But I guess I probably rebelled against it for a while, and thought it was the worst music in the world. And then you listen back and you're like, there's some good Van Morrison tracks. Yeah, I think he's a pretty bad person, but
yeah, right. Yeah.
I
don't know much about him, but yeah. There you go.
Into it.
Nah, all good. Yeah, sweet. Well, and then tell us about you said you started learning acoustic guitar. How did that progress into more music?
A bit of acoustic. I wanted to play electric. My grandma basically bought me a CD when I was 7 or 8. Green Day, American Idiot.
Yeah, love it.
Which I feel like is a lot of people's like roughly my age, like their entry into that punk rock sort of world.
Yeah, absolutely.
I used to just sit there and put it on the CD player and just sing it, like read the little lyric book, sing along to that.
Yeah.
And that made me want to get an electric guitar.
Yeah.
I was like, I need distortion.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, the tones on that album.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then, I think I begged for an electric guitar for a long time and got one when I was maybe 14.
Yep.
That was when moved here and then got one.
Yep.
And started a band in high school.
Sick.
Which, was that sort of built around that. Like, Green Day, The Strokes, like we loved the same kind of indie punk world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sick. Do you remember listening to the music and being analytical at all? Like, did you have a producer's mindset back then, or was it purely like just taking the music in and appreciating it for what it is?
I think a little, probably not as much as I would like to have had, but I do think about, like, I was noticing like vocal distortion, like that record, American Idiot, it definitely had a lot of like vocal processing.
Yeah.
I definitely noticed as a kid, like, when there's a section with attitude, they ramp up some kind of effect there. I think you do notice that kind of thing if you're into that sound.
Yeah.
But, it was a long time. It wasn't until I was in my teens that I would have thought about EQ or compression or anything like that technical.
And so you're playing in bands. When did you sort of start to think about production and engineering and stuff? Did you have someone that showed you it, or did you kind of just like find it yourself? Or
I sort of got into it on a very basic level in high school, just to record my own band, just demos for that. For my birthday one year, I got a couple, like an MXL, like one large diaphragm, one small diaphragm condenser pack.
Yeah, cool.
Like a really cheapy, just basically.
Yeah.
But with that, it was like, okay, 2 mics, got to figure out how to record this drum kit. Tried to figure out how to record an amp, and it sounded terrible, so just DI'd it.
Yeah.
And just those demos, just for like having something to listen back to, like, do we actually sound any good? Which we didn't, but it was like a good start to the learning curve.
And it was so exciting. Like, my mates had like, I actually had a 4-track cassette recorder. It was Tascam Porter Studio thing. That was fun. And then my mate had a Yamaha one, which is actually upstairs. And it was a little bit better. It had EQ and stuff. My one was just literally level. But it was just so much fun to be able to listen back to your own music and just like, this is us. Like, we're listening to ourselves, So it was like, I feel like, I don't know if everyone has to have that to start off with. There has to be some degree of that. Surely you have to like want to hear something back that you've created, there's something so cool about that.
For sure. And getting to manipulate it for the first time. Yeah. Honestly, because, when you're just a bunch of teenagers like playing in a spare room, it was too loud. It was all our instruments were terrible. Like the drums weren't
10 watt
tuned.
amps.
Just a horrible sound. But if you recorded it, it gave you a little wiggle room of like, it's a terrible drum sound, but I can put this like weird reverb on it that does something. It's not necessarily good, but it was just a way of like, I guess, how do you move forward from just being a demo, just like a high school band? What's how do you get creative with it? And discovering that that's another level of fun. Like there's one level of you're hanging out with your mates, you're writing something, but then there's like, you can spend hours at home on a computer just
tweaking.
Have fun by yourself.
Yeah, over compressing everything.
Everything's
Scoop
destroyed.
EQing everything.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, sick. So then how did that move into you becoming more serious about it? You had your own band, you were recording your own stuff, like.
I guess, I was super interested in it at the end of high school. I was sort of approaching a couple of other local bands just to do demos with them.
Yep.
Or sometimes they were approaching me to do like, little EPs and things, but it was all still home recorded. I did apply to go to JMC, which is like an arts college for anyone that doesn't know, one of those kind of things.
Yeah.
But I went there for a few months and then dropped out. I met that high school band that I had. We recorded at a place in Brisbane called The Shed.
Yep. Yeah, per the Shed.
So like Violent Soho recorded, I guess most famously.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was owned by this guy, Derek Mudge. He's recording engineer to this day.
Yep.
Really talented, super nice guy, like one of the nicest guys I've ever met in the industry. And we recorded with him and Bryce Moorhead, who did those Violent Soho records, or a couple of them. I think that was where it became like a real, these are people that actually do it.
Yeah.
They were my first people. Oh, and I also around that time met Konstantin Kersting. He recorded our first EP, that old band.
Yep.
So yeah, I met this handful of people anyway, like from different backgrounds, different styles. Got to see how they all approach it differently. Bryce let me sit in on a mixing session, and my mind was blown by what he was doing.
Because it's also foreign. Like the first time, like you walk into a studio and there's all this gear, and like you're like, what is it? Like,
how do you keep track of it?
And I feel like for me, like I walked into a studio, Salt Studios, and there was all this outboard gear, and I was like, it's all just completely something that I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to try and understand what it does. It just looks like flashing lights and knobs, and like I'm just not even gonna touch it.
It's intimidating, and if it's expensive. So I always had that fear of like I'm going to break it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or I'm going to ruin it.
Yeah.
One of the main things that, those early days, like getting into it, was doing sessions with Derek, and he was just like, you can compress the kick on the way, and just starting like absolute basics. He's running the session, but we've got like 1176s. He had 4 or 5 or something.
Yep.
And he was like, just get it until the meter's moving. 4-1, slowest attack, fastest release, minimal damage, but just getting a bit of character.
Yeah.
And then, it's like, okay, you got that. Now just do the same thing with the snare. And that would be like all I would do on a session.
Sure.
But just to learn like, you can touch this $5,000 thing and it's not going to blow up.
Totally.
You're not going to ruin anything. There are like starting points. It's not creative, really. That's
more
for
an
later.
Application, yeah.
But once you figure it out, that's when you can get creative and say, all right, all buttons in, slam it. I'm committing to that sound. Yeah.
Yeah, that's sick. And so you did a bunch of sessions, you sat in. How did you then move into becoming an engineer? You know, when did you start to feel like, all right, I'm an engineer now? How did that happen?
Always feel a bit more like an engineer. Like each time you do it, you still kind of feel like, I guess because I came from like doing or like writing music more so. It's always felt like a transition into it in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, those sessions, like basically being an assistant, and at the same time, I was doing sessions where I was the sole producer, but it was still like home demo level basically. And then kind of split this EP up that, Derek did half and I did half.
Oh, that's cool.
And then that gave me the confidence to like now go out to bands and say, I can do it.
Yeah.
Like I can start and end the thing.
Yeah.
I worked with this band that moved to Melbourne. They were a Queensland, New South Wales band called Garage Sale.
Yep. No,
now they do sort of shoegazy stuff.
Okay, cool.
But back then they were a bit more of like a punky, I don't know, like Dune Rats or something.
Oh, yeah, cool.
That kind of world.
Yeah. Garagey, punky sort of thing.
Yeah. Them and this band called Glass House, that were like a grungy thing as well. Started definitely in that grungy world. Doing those kinds of stuff. And just producing my own band. It was just like a good blend of like we were hiring studios but also doing stuff at home.
Yeah.
Learning the difference between what you're paying for at a studio, like why you're paying that money.
Totally.
And what you can get away with doing at home.
Yeah.
Which you definitely can, like add things to it.
Yeah.
But
well, especially these days.
Yeah.
Like,
but the first thing I realized was like no more drums at home. Like once I've done it in a studio, no more drums at home.
Yeah, absolutely. There's such a difference. Even like just having, a different selection of mics and like having more than 3 or 4 mics.
Yeah.
And just, being able to close mic things, room mics and all that sort of stuff. It just like, it's like, okay, now I can start to picture how, pros approach it and actually capture these sounds, whether they're sampling or not. That's even different story, but start to learn about that as well and whatever else. But yeah, that's sick. So then you're working on other people's stuff. What did the process look like, and has it changed that much to these days?
The production process, like early on,
like,
those like
setting up for recordings, miking things.
It's changed a lot. Yeah.
Yep.
I think I was going by my minimal uni time, like
Yep.
what they showed me there, which was very, I feel, by the book, very standard.
Yeah.
There were things where they were like, basically high pass everything at 80 hertz. And I was like, yeah, sure. And, small diaphragm condensers, space pair overheads, like all the standards.
Yeah.
They tell you the other options maybe, but give you a starting point.
Yeah.
Which is fair.
Yeah.
But when you realize the sounds you like don't come from that starting point, right? Then you got to start trying other things.
It's like, why do my drums sound so thin? Like,
yeah, exactly. And I was recording drums in those early demo days, and it's like, it's wide, the space pair, like gets you the width, but there's no punch. And I think you kind of go the opposite way straight away. It's like, how do I get the punchiest possible sound then? And then I learned from other people that I was working with or other people that I was living with at that time. Like I was living with this, a few members of this band called the Jensens.
Yep.
Kind of psych rock band.
Cool.
And they self-produced everything, self-recorded. We had the studio under the house, and I went down there and watched one of their sessions, and they had just one mono overhead.
Yep.
Nice and low. Drums tuned so low that there's just like nothing to them. Just a
thud. Yeah.
Barely there. Shirts over everything, tapes over everything. And I listened to it and I was like, that's the punchiest. That's how you do it. Right. Keep it really simple, like maybe 5 mics on the whole kit.
Yeah.
And they were tracking live. And I was like, complete opposite approach to what I've been told, but I preferred that sound. And then, start going down that path.
Yeah. And when you start to, I feel like in a similar vein is like understanding phase and phase alignment, and, miking things and paying attention to that sort of stuff on the way in to capture the best sound possible at the time, as opposed to then later going, I just need to boost this kick up. And then it's like, why is it still not punching? And it's like, it's all these little pieces of the puzzle that just add up and then eventually create that big picture when you finally get it there and you're like, I get it now. Like every little thing matters.
Yeah.
I feel like when you're at the start, I don't know what it was like for you, but it was kind of just like chuck it on and worry about later.
Yeah, for sure. Like you've got it.
Yeah.
But you don't really have it.
Yeah, exactly.
It
and
seems
you're not able to like monitor drums when you're tracking and stuff like that, like you're saying in your bedroom or something, or your mate's house or something like that. Yeah. I was taking like a Mackie desk that was an interface as well and just carting it wherever, rehearsal rooms, people's houses, and just like not monitoring any of it. Just like, that mic placement's fine. I'll figure it out. Yeah. Yep. So then, your process looks different now. What does a standard recording session look like now?
Sort of depending on the project, depending on the artist, which I'm sure everyone says that. But I do have preferences. Like I wouldn't remember the last time that I did record drums without a mono overhead. Usually the stereo as well, but I would say regardless of the band, get a mono overhead.
Yep.
It's just part of the way that you get mono drums for me. I think it's just because I guess you like learn your mixing process. And I want to have like a solid center of every track. And I would rather have a solid center and no stereo on things like drums than I would have, all this width, but there's that zero punch in the middle.
Yeah.
Not that, like you can have both. Like we're lucky that we don't have to choose.
Yeah,
Everything's
totally.
not going to 4 tracks or whatever.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, the first track I'm going to get is a mono overhead. Because if you can make that sound good, sure, you could be 80%, 90% of the way there.
Yeah.
If it's the right mic, the kit, probably most importantly, if the kit is tuned really nicely. And a nice kit helps.
Yeah.
And, if the drummer is doing that like self-mixing, playing everything at the right levels, you could, I feel on a lot of stuff, get away with that. I don't think I've ever stuck with just one mic and a final mix, but I could.
But I mean, that's like you're saying, it's like most of the job's done there.
Yeah.
If you're capturing that sound that you're after with one mic.
Yeah.
I mean, Eric Valentine.
Right.
And a number of other engineers.
Yeah.
Exactly the same way. They're like, if I can make my job easier, I will.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Minimal,
I love that.
Like
love that
phase,
approach.
Phase issues from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's nice. I think, that was a big thing. Like you start point a mic at the thing that you want.
Mm-hmm.
You start to realize the issues. So you start putting lots of mics on lots of things. This will be a backup for that.
Yeah.
You learn, maybe I can blend. I definitely had a phase where I was putting 4 mics on a bass amp and getting a DI. And it's like 5 tracks just for the bass. I was like, but it'll give me the option.
Yeah.
Because I've got like an SM7 and an Audix D6 and a condenser and it's like, well, if I want grit, I'll write up the 47. And if I, it's for these subtle.
It's so complicated.
It's so complicated. It's so much disk space.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's also that these mics, although they're different, they're recording the exact same thing. So they're really capturing like 2 dB differences. Like, the 47's 2 dB brighter at 5K than the. And it's like, wow, is it? It's too many mics, and you're getting into like self-indulgent. Like it's too for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not working for the recording.
The song.
You're like, And it's like just one mic well placed is better than 5 mics in the wrong spot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just for options. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so when you're, moving forward to production, what did that transition look like? Were you always part of the production process, and what were you focused on at the start, as opposed to now? What's the production focus side of things?
Yeah, I probably did a little more live tracking at the start. So I do a lot of, especially back then, was doing mainly bands, rockier bands. And that's the quickest way for them to feel comfortable, what they're used to playing together.
Yep.
Even if they're not in the same room, even if it's one of those things where they've just got sight lines through a window, whatever it is. Now I probably do things a bit more separated. But again, it still depends. If a band is really great live, then you want to try and keep that energy.
That. Absolutely, yeah.
But because I've worked with more solo projects and things in like folk and alternative or whatever, a lot of the time there's no other option. So
and it benefits from having that focus on that player at the time as well, because it's much more delicate. With a loud rock band, the distortions covering everything, loud cymbals and stuff. It's like, it's cool. But, when you're focusing on folk and, acoustic instruments and things like delicate, you gotta pay attention, and your brain can only pay attention to so many things at once, right? Yeah, sweet. And so when you think back about your time from now to then, workflow wise, how has workflow improved? What are the things that you like to focus on now to make it faster for yourself? You talked about less mics, that sort of thing. Is there other things that you are always really mindful of and want to get done really quickly? Or
I think I personally love to get in pretty early, and especially if it's a studio I'm not as familiar with, partly because I just like the environment, and I can get to know it and get to see what the gear is, and but also like it's good to get in and even like choosing the part of the room that you're going to set the drums up in.
Totally, yeah.
It's not necessarily where they are when you get there.
Get it all done, yeah.
There's rooms where you go and the drums are in the corner because it's keeping them out of the way, but the corner is where they sound tubby and dull and claustrophobic. And usually I'm pulling the drums to sort of the middle-ish of the room, if they're not tracking live. I've got that space, because then I can put room mics anywhere.
Wherever,
and you never know what's going to be an interesting sound. So I like to get in early just to try and find some spots that I think are going to be exciting for the band.
Nice, yeah.
And it makes me seem like I've got some kind of trick up my sleeve. They get there, like, whoa, that room sounds
good. This is definitely the right space, guys.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
But workflow, speeding it up. I mean, just having more confidence now is the main thing. Like not second guessing mic choices or placement too much.
Mm-hmm.
If it needs to change, it needs to change. I'm also not like rigid on any one setup.
Yep.
But again, it's like if you have the time beforehand, it's nice to like write down a quick list of like, maybe I'll do a setup I've done before, but maybe this time I'm going to chuck a ribbon mic over the drummer's shoulder, and that's just going to get that trashy, whatever it is you're looking for. Just trying to find some. I think it's nice, even if you end up with a system that you follow a lot of the time, finding ways to make it distinct.
Yeah, absolutely. And changing it up as well. You know, there is a benefit to knowing your process and doing things the same way because it's reliable and things like that. But I think it's really important, even if it's just one mic in a weird place, just to have something different to play around with and just for experimentation purposes, because, you know, we don't have the luxury of, you know, necessarily having a drum kit set up all the time and having a friend that can play drums and we're just playing around with mic positions for our whole life. You know, we don't have that. So it's important to, you know, to just try something different each session so that you can go, that's sick, I'm going to do that from now on. You know, you just never know what's going to come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you pick those things up and then you kind of wear them out and then you look, you're onto a new thing.
Yeah.
Like, it will be something like that, a mic in a certain position.
Yeah.
You're like, this is the sound I've been looking for. And then you do it on an album and you're like, I never want to do that specific sound again. I've played it.
Yep.
You know, I've done it. That was that. Maybe we'll come back to it in a few years.
Yeah, exactly. Or there just might be that certain artist that reminds you of the other one. Like, I'm going to do that trick again.
That's it.
I love it. So you've worked with a bunch of, you know, different acts and, you know, a bunch of really cool acts, you know, Jaguar Jones, Screamfeeder and things like that. So they're vastly different styles. Do you find, you know, that your approach to working with different artists is similar across the board? Do you have this kind of one approach that you, when it comes to actually working with the client, or is it so bespoke in each time?
Yeah, I mean, it's project dependent, you know, according to like a lot of things, you know, like budget and time obviously are always the first things you have to figure out, like what someone actually expects and wants to get out of it.
Yeah.
But I guess in terms of approach between different artists and different genres and that, I wouldn't say I treat them that differently. Like production, I feel like so much of it is just the taste of the producer, like what they think sounds good. And yeah, the gear in the studio and there are factors, but at the end of the day, you're like one of the voices in the room. And obviously some artists don't, they've got their own thing figured out.
Yeah.
And you don't even need to comment on it.
Nah. Yep.
But a lot of artists are looking for guidance and
Totally.
Not that they're not sure of themselves, but they could use just a decision maker. A sounds good and B sounds good, but we can sit here and listen back and forth for an hour, or I can make the decision for you. And that's coming from taste. That's coming from what I think sounds good. So I feel like the taste is the same, whether, it is like a punk band or a pop artist.
Yep.
If they've got that A-B, it's like instinct. Or, well, kind of. I mean, it's like built instinct, like what you choose to listen to in your free time. And
absolutely. And I think like you make an important point about taste. I mean, you can only go from what you like anyway. So like there's a reason why someone's hired you.
Yeah.
Right. Because they like other stuff that you've done.
Hopefully.
So hopefully, hopefully. Not always, of course. People just search on Google and find you somehow.
Yeah.
But I think it's, and you said before a great word, confidence as well. And that comes so much into a recording and production session, especially. People want to know that you can make decisions because you have to commit to something, right?
Yeah.
You can't just not commit to something. You can't just say, I don't know, let's just keep trying mics. It's just such a waste of time. And so that comes with time, of course. You eventually start, once you've used X mic on 6 different records and then, you know, try something else. Okay, that's the difference. Yep, cool. I like that one. You know, that confidence takes time to build, but at the end of the day, you do have to commit to something. And I think that commitment to being like, let's just go with it. I know that this will work. Like you said, you sometimes have a couple of choices, put it in their hands. whatever. But I think at the end of the day, the artist has hired you for a reason. They want to know that you know what you're doing, and that just gives them confidence to do what they need to do because then they don't have to worry about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're there to perform, to sometimes keep writing or start writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like enough jobs for them to worry about without them considering is a Neve or an API going to be like, they don't need to think about it. If they're interested, then, that's great. Yeah. But it's not expected of them. Like it's two separate worlds with a beautiful meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
It's an actor and a director. Like you need both to get the final vision.
That. Yeah.
But it's good to each have confidence in your own worlds.
I think there's nothing better than having that sort of relationship with the artist. Is like, I fully trust you to do your thing. Yeah. You can fully trust me to do my thing. We'll just both kill it together.
That's it. It's just a great team, just a great collaboration. You can't, I guess, necessarily have the exact same vision in mind because how could you? But through some level of not compromise, kind of compromise, but like a happy compromise, playing things a little differently or trying, different song structure. Sometimes they get there and they're happy with the song structure, but they've been listening to it for 5 years and they've been adding things and adding things and adding things. And sometimes it's better to take something away. Yeah. It can just go so many ways. And it's like you said, if you've been hired, then hopefully they want they like something you've done or whatever it is. And it's good to just say, I'm hearing this for the first time. Yeah. Or maybe I heard a demo or something, but it's newer to me than it is to the artist. Yep. And my immediate thought is maybe it doesn't need 6 choruses. 3 or 4 is good. Yeah. And if they trust you, then you're on your way.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, thanks so much for listening so far. There is plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast is made completely independently by myself with no sponsors. So if you like what you hear and you would like to show your support, you can send a donation to the PayPal link, paypal.me/whatsthatsound. The link is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and let's get back to it. Talk us through, your specific choices of, gear now. Microphone choice, how important is it for you? What are your favorites? Let's just start with microphones for now.
Okay. Yeah.
Is it that important?
It is. It's exciting and it's part of what I like about it. It is important. It's, the most important thing is the source, the instrument, the player, and the song. And then after that, I guess the microphone. So it is really important because I think, it's a lot higher up than your preamp. It's higher up than what you're doing with it creatively, not creatively, but if you're running it through a compressor when you're tracking, like that's fun. And I do like to commit to an attitude with something if you can. Yeah. Not always compression, but, just whatever it may be, running something through a pedal. Like I'd always rather record a guitar tone with a delay pedal on it and we're all grabbing it in the room and getting it right there instead of recording a bone dry guitar and then get home and it's like add a delay plug in. And
it's so hard to know what the artist wants as well. Yeah.
And it's no fun.
Yeah.
It's no fun doing that way. Yeah. So sorry, that's a bit off topic from mics.
It's good.
But microphones, they are important. I don't know. I remember seeing this post from Nigel Godrich, like Radiohead's producer. He did one of those like ask me anything things, and someone said, "What's your go-to mic?" And he's got access to $50,000 Abbey Road U47s and that. And he just posted a photo of a SM57, and he's like, "If it doesn't sound good through this, it doesn't sound good." And I mean, I'd rather choose a different mic, probably still, ironically, but.
I mean, the 57 on a guitar cab is very
fine.
Difficult to beat.
It's the standard for a reason. I basically never use it, but it's just because I think I like to try not to do the standard thing. Nothing wrong with the standard thing, but for me, it's like a creative outlet as much as songwriting or as much as playing.
Yep.
So why not try a different mic and just see what sound it gives you?
And I love that you said commit to an attitude. I think that's a really cool way of thinking about it. And I don't think I think about it that strictly, but I'm sure that comes into my decision making where you are going for a certain sound and there's a way, 100 ways you could do it.
Yeah.
But if you can get closer to achieving that attitude that you're after, that might be something that's really calm and chill and airy or something like, it could be anything. But I love that you put it that way. That's, it's fascinating. Yeah.
I don't know, if you've got the artist there with you in the room, you want them to feel the energy that they're trying to put in it is there in the room, or it's just going to kill everyone's mood. That's
such a good point. Yeah, I love it. So we've talked about things that work. I like to also discuss the things that don't work. And, there can be a number of things that go wrong in sessions, when you're dealing with people, different personalities, that sort of thing. Are there things that tend to pop up lots that you notice, or is it kind of like a constant just problem solving? We'll deal with it as we go.
I feel like a problem that pops up a lot in studios is the headphone sounds. If you're a specific problem, so many that I don't know what's going on with the headphones.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like actually, what issues you're likely to run into? I mean, if it's a band, I feel usually the band members disagreeing or not only on what to do, but even on like what they've done in the past. They're like, no, this definitely goes for 8 bars. They're like, it doesn't go for 8. At practice, we played it for 12. And it's like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And almost not a problem, but a solution to problems, like a good mentality to have just to avoid the problems completely is to try and go into the studio. Like I try and say to people, we're not necessarily doing the demo but higher quality. We're coming in and we're making a new piece of music inspired by something that you've already come up with, And it can be, the intro can be the outro. The bridge we can get rid of it because bridges are usually a waste of time. The chorus might be the quietest part of the song. Yeah. You can drop and change so much in the studio because the energy is different in there. Yeah. You just feel, if you feel excited and you feel willing to see where the song can go instead of, it has to be this and the studio is just so we can get it at a high fidelity.
Yep.
But that's not what it's for, It's like it's a creative space to take the vision any way you want to go. Yeah. You can change genre while you're in the studio.
Yeah.
You can get there and there might be a 12-track album and every song has really standard 4/4 drums. Yeah. And if you're going to do that, why not swap in like a nice old drum machine on a track even for a verse, like just don't get too caught in this is how we played it at rehearsal. Rehearse, but
yeah. Well, I mean, and the creativity aspect of it is kind of keeps popping up in this conversation. And so when you have those sorts of conversations with people, it can be quite a foreign thing. And I know from experience that people get demo artists and get tied to a thing because, like you said before, they've been playing it for a number of years. They've been tightening it in the way that they know how. And how does that usually go down? And what are some of the things that you have to fight against, I guess? And what are your approaches there?
Yeah, it's that attachment to the demo. And I get it. Like I totally get it. I do demos and there's something sometimes about the take or you can even, sometimes you have a demo and you've got 20 great ideas, but you just can't have them all playing at once.
Yeah.
And so it can be almost like emotional. And sometimes it's like convincing people that it's better to hear your 1 or 2 great ideas clearly and upfront than 15 great ideas all fighting each other and no one can hear a thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, I've worked with bands that want to do 100 different guitar tracks at once. Yeah. And at some point you have to say, like, it's just every element you add to a mix makes every other element smaller.
Yeah.
And so when they say, I want the guitars to sound huge, let's track it 8 times. It's like, but every time you do that, you're halving how big each guitar feels.
Yeah, the effectiveness of it as well. Yeah.
Because you've got to turn each one down 6 dB or whatever come mix
And they all
time.
just fight.
They all fight.
Fight for attention.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you can only listen to so many things at once. Like, and there's a thing that for specific genres or tracks or anything like that, there is this cool unpacking of, you know, sonic landscapes and things like that. It doesn't work as often as we think it should. You know, I feel like there can be just so much that we can throw into a song and, you know, chuck in effects, chuck in this, chuck in that. But like you said, like as soon as everything starts fighting, it loses its like cohesiveness.
Yeah.
And it can lose the listener's attention.
Yeah, for sure.
It can be, I feel like you usually have to be in a certain frame of mind or a certain mood to want to listen to something that dense.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think for most people that's their go-to. Like,
especially when it's, you know, a lot of the time it might be, if it's a younger or newer band, the approach of trying to give them like that wall of sound thing, I really don't get why you would approach it that way. Because they're a young new band and they're playing shows around and they have a certain sound and it's the sound of, you know, 2 guitarists or a guitarist and a keyboardist, bassist, vocalist. And so doing like, we're going to have 10 layers of backing vocals, 10 layers of guitars. And I don't think a record has to sound like a live band at all. Like I'm definitely not in that world. You can totally do something completely different. But I don't see why. It just seems sometimes like there's a big focus on just, absolutely polishing everything. But there's so many generic polished bands out there. That's not interesting. Like, I guess it's because things didn't used to be polished in the sort of, because of tape or because of whatever, the format, you know. And now we can make things so polished that it's like,
we need to
like hyper prioritized.
Yeah, absolutely.
The number one thing is having a shiny, perfect record. But there's shiny, perfect records that are terrible and fatiguing and it just does nothing for you. And then there's stuff that I guess you would call lo-fi or, you know, whatever you want to call it.
Simple.
Like a band like Krungbin, you know.
Okay, I've never heard of them.
There's sort of like, they're a 3-piece. Soul, funk, inspired kind of stuff. But they're on a lot of like indie playlists. You see them on a lot of bills with like a Mac DeMarco, like something in that world, right? And their mixes sound huge, but they're basically mono. Sounds like probably recorded the drums with maybe 4 or 5 mics. I think they record outdoors.
Right.
There's a little bit of outdoor sort of hiss and hum.
Cool.
Their mixes sound huge. Because there's a guitar, bass, and maybe 4 or 5 mics.
Nothing's fighting.
But the character is right.
The attitude.
The attitude's there. And there's nothing getting in the way. There's never more than a guitar and a vocal melody. There's only ever those 2 things playing with each other. Nothing sounds bigger than that. And cramming 64 guitar tracks in. It's polished, but it ultimately sounds smaller.
And I go back to it being fatiguing. I think there's just so many modern acts that want that really hyper intense. And it'll go in trends. Like that'll go away again. We'll go through another period of like lo-fi indie folk stuff that'll come back in a different version. You know, I feel like everything goes in waves, but there is this tendency for modern music to be really in your face, really sharp, really full and like crunchy and pristine. And it's berating and you can only listen to so much of it. But I mean, it's funny, but I guess then how do you approach that? Like if you feel like someone really, really wants that, what then do you do? How do you come to a middle ground? Like what, do you have these specific approaches of, ways to talking with the clients and things like that?
If someone really wants that polished sound, I mean, I'm not going to rule it out. If they think it's right and I can hear what they're going for, But I guess, I mean, honestly, I'm not a polished producer. Like I'm not going for that. I mean, I do stuff. I do some stuff where I guess it's hi-fi as well, but I'm never looking for that complete radio rock sound. And there are people that do the radio rock sound so well, and at the risk of talking myself out of work with them. Like if you want that sound, it really is up to the artist. Like there's no point in, like a Mac DeMarco going to work with Chris Lord Algie. Yeah. That mixing style, sample replacing all of Mac DeMarco's carefully curated, tape recorded, home bedroom muffled snare drum hits. What would be the point? Yeah. It's not that, it's almost that they're past a certain level of like hobbyists. As long as you're working with a professional, there aren't even good or bad producers. There are just ones that fit or don't fit a sound. Like
it's important to have those conversations with the client. Like, and that is part of my vetting process. Is like it's important to understand that person that wants to work with you. Yeah, and to know if you're the right person for you. And there is such power in saying no. And there's power in like referring them to someone else that you trust to nail that sound. Yeah, like. That, I mean, that builds respect. That builds, there's something honest about that. And I think there's times that you have to say no. There's times where you have to respectfully be like, I'm just not the right person to do this. Yeah. And having those honest conversations can be tough. Yeah. Can be really hard, but especially if that person's gone out of their way, they've spent time to, I think it's the better way in the end of the day. Yeah.
I mean, I won't necessarily, like if there's a way to do it, like I've worked with pop artists and I'm not really in the pop world, like singer-songwriter sort of pop stuff. But it's only because I could see a way to do it that I knew I was going to enjoy. Like there was something, some creative, whatever it is, outlet in it for me. And that they were happy with that vision and that sound. They'd asked me for tracks in a similar vein that I'd done before. And to me, they weren't hyper polished or anything. I'm definitely not, I know my brand or whatever, you know, I know I'm not that style.
That's important as well, yeah.
I don't sample replace drums ever. I've done it one time because someone asked for it. Right. But otherwise I don't do it. Yep. I don't tune vocals unless I'm asked to and I'll do it. But if we can avoid anything that kind of homogenizes all of the music that comes out now. Anyone could sample replace anything with anything. And where's the creativity? It's almost like, I don't want to open up a chat about AI, but it's almost verging on that where a lot of producers that are, and I'm not so much talking about hip hop or anything where sampling is a more refined and specific sort of art, but I mean in the rock world or the indie or whatever, to take live drum recording and just assume you're going to replace all the snares later. That's like an AI. Like that's, it's all going to get replaced by something that's, I have no creative say over. But no disrespect to anyone that does it that way. There is a place for that sound. I just mean that that's not how I approach it. If someone wanted, like, I have friends that I would recommend who can do an incredible polished, like pop punk record, and I couldn't do it. Like I don't know how to tackle that, but I know how I would do it. Yes, and that maybe my way would be a little dirtier and have more subs and less air, and it might have a more of a focus on texture, and then their way is going to be hyper clean. It's might have more energy than it's all just little compromises or stylistic changes. Not that one's better or worse, but just what is the artist looking for?
Let's diverge into a more like overall approach of the music industry. What things do you find, because this fascinates me, I always like to understand every engineer and producer's like different gripes with the industry. You know, what things do you tend to notice overall in the world as opposed to specific projects and things like that? What things pop up that you wish, let's change this, you know what I mean?
In the world?
Well, in the music industry. In the music industry
overall.
Are there things that like you notice that you're like, Why does it have to be this way?
To get really outside of production, but still in the music world, half jokingly, but sort of not.
I'm nervous.
Why does every band do a music video in front of a white backdrop? What's that about? Like, I get like it's a photo studio and that's like what's there, but it's not really an idea.
Yep.
I don't know. It's not really relevant to the content of the show. But if you want to gripe outside of audio production, I guess it's the same thing. It's like homogenized. Like everyone's got a video in front of a white backdrop.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like annoy anyone, any band that's watching
that.
this. Like they've
I've
done
done one.
You've done
I've done one.
I've probably
Everyone's done
considered
it.
doing one. Like, I've probably thought about it, but then it's like, why?
Yeah.
Just because that's what is done.
Yeah.
It's a trend, or it's just simple, or it's easy, or it's the lighting's nice and it's a clean backdrop, so it's like a good way to show what your band looks like, I guess. But it's not really an idea, is it?
It's just simple for the sake of simple, I guess. Yeah. And not being super creative. Well,
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's not that big of a deal. It's just like in terms of like trends and things that you notice, it's just like every time I see a band's new music video, they're in front of a white backdrop. Like, why did that become the? Yeah.
Well, I guess let's bring a little back more into the audio world. When you are when you first started, when you were first learning about, music production, things like that, what expectations did you have of the way that things were going to work, and how does it differ in reality, and what have you focused on in being like, nah, this is my way?
I guess early on I probably thought that just having the role of producer, that people would listen to you or defer to you or run things past you in a certain way or whatever it is. And then I think the more you do it, the more you learn. It's completely different with every artist, but it's entirely your relationship with the artist. And I think we mentioned it earlier, but it's some artists you don't need to say anything.
Yeah.
They've thought about this. They have their sound.
Yeah.
Your job is to put the right mic in front of them, and they don't even need to talk about what they're going for.
Yeah.
And some artists, it's like you're temporarily in the band or in the project, and they want a second opinion on everything from the start of, like, maybe they don't even have the lyrics finished.
Yeah.
And they'll come in and they'll have two different things scribbled down.
Yep.
Which one should I do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love both. Like they're both great. But I guess when I started, it's like, oh, you're the producer and there's the artist, and they'll come to you. But there's never it's never exactly the same. I think with every band, there's a different amount of give and take and collaboration.
Well, as soon as you bring a number of people or even a single person into a studio, everyone's going to work differently. I love the fact of collaborating with a group of people for the sake of, it's like this melting pot of ideas.
Yeah.
But then I love the individual because you can get so intimate, for lack of a better term, in terms of their creative process and helping them sculpt a specific sound that I don't think you get when it comes to a group of people. And it's always, like you said, it's always going to be different, and there's a place for all of it. And it is funny when you first start off the ideas of what a producer does, and the fact that every producer is different. Like,
sure, yeah.
Like everyone's got a different style and approach to doing that one task of capturing a song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got friends who are producers who I've spoken to and asked them like what they love, just chit chat.
Yep.
And there's one guy, I won't say who it is, but just that he was like, if I could only mix, I would mix. But usually a band wants the producer mixer to be the same person, or in a lot of genres, that's true. And I found that so interesting. Like there are some people that are just in this for the technical, I mean, it's creative as well, but you know what I mean? They would basically be happy at their computer, just receiving files and just sculpting something that goes out into the world.
Yeah.
And then there are surely complete opposites.
People that have no intention of mixing something.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It doesn't interest them.
Yep.
They just want that capture. They're probably great socially.
Yep.
I'm right in the middle. I love parts of both.
Yep. Same. Yep.
You've got to connect with the person for the recording to really feel good.
Yep.
But yeah, it is just totally different, person to person, band to band. Yeah.
Well, then I guess I want to ask, like, what's the most exciting thing, you know, say you're looking for the next 12 months or 2 years or whatever. What is the thing that excites you about what you do, and what do you want to, you know, what do you want to do the most of then?
A artist or a band, anyone that wants to make something that sounds different, not just genre. It can be, it can sit in a world like songwriting wise. It doesn't have to be experimental. You know, it can be a verse chorus type stuff. But someone who's interested in texture and just trying something different, just anything different. I still do this not because it's a high paying job, because it's at my level, it's not. But because I get creative enjoyment out of it. And even with all the marketing and all the everything that comes with this industry, at its core, right, most people surely want to create something.
Yeah.
And that's the heart of it. Like, that's what I want to get to. So yeah, it could be, say, maybe it's just a rock band and they just have verse chorus, but they're willing to approach it. They want to
have fun with
just
it.
anything. Yeah, they're just open to it. They have a vision, or they're open to me guiding them somewhere with it. Because there's never a band I hear and I don't have an opinion on it.
Yeah.
Or anything,
I don't think it's possible for a producer.
No. So it's, in a way, that's the easiest part of the job, is for me, like the vision.
Yeah.
A band comes in and they're like, oh, we don't know what to do with this. I'll instantly have an opinion on everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But again, it's that decision making.
Yeah.
Cut that backing vocal, it's just muddying it up and move on.
Yep.
The end style and feeling of the song is always what you're trying to get to. And I always want it to be different.
Yep.
I wouldn't want to mix something and then someone heard it and they said, oh, that sounds like a Keelan mix.
Yeah.
He did that on the last one.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah.
You got to try something.
Change it up.
Or you don't have to, but I want to try something different every time. That's the fun of it.
It's exciting.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, you might know that I always like to finish off the podcast by asking, for people that are in their first, 5 years of doing this, what best piece of advice do you have, first of all, for producers / engineers / songwriters? Secondly, for artists?
For producer engineers, probably doing less, being a bit more minimal. How well can you record a drum kit with one mic? How good can you make it sound with like 2 plugins? Because I've definitely been there where I've got 100 plugins across all my drum tracks, total. Yeah. And the fewer plugins I've used over the years, the better my mixes have gotten. Yeah. Every time. It's exciting to try plugins because they're different brushes, they're different colors to try out, and there's totally a place for them. But when you're looking at your snare track and you've gained it, de-essed it, gated it, EQ'd it, compressed it, tape saturation, decapitator, another tape saturation, that added too much low end EQ. And it's like you could probably have gotten it done with just decapitator and the gate. And just like shifted the tone in one direction. And not only that, but you would have saved time. Yeah. Because you spent an hour on the snare, cooked your ears, and now everything sounds too dull compared to the snare. Yeah.
Or you're just like listening to the snare only.
Well,
like, why can I not hear anything else but the snare now?
That's the other thing, right? Getting too microscopic. Yeah. Definitely for years. Yeah, exactly. The first 5 years, easy. Yeah. Doing this, I was soloing everything. And like, can I sculpt this to because you think that's what the pros are doing. Yeah. Because I hear a Radiohead mix and I'm like, that snare is beautiful. They must have done so. And I don't know, but odds are it was tracked through a nice mic, great drummer, great kit, probably a couple of plugins, probably a bit of EQ and gating. Yeah. But it was done to tape. It was compressed in the room. It was the right part for the right song. all of that came long before, and it wasn't saved by a magic plugin. But I do love plugins. I do use plugins and get fancy, interesting plugins just for that. Maybe that will be the right color for something. Maybe.
That's it. Yeah. I love it. And then for artists that might be listening.
A lot of the artists that I talk to do a lot of demos. And obviously that's great. Like definitely demo, you know. But I think it's another way of looking at, that's almost like width of demos. Like, oh, I have 36 demos for this album, right? But another way of looking at it is if you want a 10-track album, take 10, 12, 15 of the tracks that you think are good and re-record them in a different style or at a different speed or with a different mood or intention, attitude in mind.
I'm going to keep bringing it back because I love it. I love it. It's a cool way to think about it. Yeah.
Maybe your, you know, sour, sarcastic, angry rock song is cool and everything, but we've heard a million angry rock songs. What if it was bongos and acoustic, but with those same spiteful lyrics? It just might be something no one's ever heard before. So, and it might not go anywhere, but then at least you can be confident that what you are doing was the right track to begin with.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone, but just in terms of like, definitely that's how I do my demos. Like for this album I'm working on right now, I've done like 15 demos for it over the last 3 years. I don't write that many songs at all, but I go back to the same song and I think, what if this was like a jazz band trying to play this indie rock song or just different, it's just like putting a filter on a photo. It's just like bringing some different color out in it.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. I love that. That's great songwriting approach, and it sounds like a lot of fun.
It is.
Nice one, man. Well, what do you got coming up in the near future?
I've got a single coming out well, it depends on when this comes out.
It's probably in about a month or so.
I've got a single out.
Great.
I've got a few songs out through my writing project called Worry Weather. There's a couple albums that I'm mixing at the moment, left over I moved from Brisbane last year.
Yep.
So I'm still sort of wrapping that up.
Yep.
Since moving to Melbourne, I worked with Woody Anderson, great producer, you know, did The Living End and Children Collide. We did a session with Children Collide that will see the light of day at some point.
Yeah.
And I did another session with him, this like grungy band called 7 Pound Halo.
Oh yeah.
That'll come out at some point. So there's a few things coming out, mix wise. Some other stuff I don't know what I can say about it. But there's those things anyway.
Sweet.
Will be out or be coming out soon by the time this comes out.
Wicked.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. It's good to meet you finally. And for anyone that wants to know more about Keelan, all of the links are in the show notes. Thanks for making it this far. If you could do us a favor and do all those things that I say every single episode, share it with a friend in a DM on your socials. Help us spread the word of this. We want to let the world know about all the amazing guests that I have on here. And make sure you hit follow or subscribe on the platform that you're checking this out on to stay up to date with everything that is new in the world. I got some big things coming, merch coming soon. Stay tuned. But yeah, thanks again, and we will see you next time on What's That Sound podcast.
Thanks for listening to What's That Sound. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.